Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Taha Kashout. I'm Vice President, Machine Learning and Chief Medical Officer for AWS, where I work with the customers and partners on innovative solutions to their health care challenges. And I'm joined here with Dr. Lee Pang today. Together, we're going to do a demonstration of all the purpose-built services that we've been building. Thank you. Just to orient a little bit about our session today, at AWS, we've been investing in healthcare since day one, with customers that we've been helping build innovative solutions to their challenges on the cloud, and from using machine learning to improve health equity and patient outcomes with customers like Rush University Medical Center and the UK NHS, to developing a COVID-19 vaccine in just 65 days, as the case with Moderna. And today I will be discussing some opportunities and challenges in the health space or the health industry. Then I will tell you about some purpose-built technologies that we're working on. And before we open it up to the floor for Q&A, both Lee and I will demonstrate how these technologies or purpose-built technologies are solving for those challenges for these customers using a lung cancer use case or example. 10 years ago, George Church, the father of genomics, pointed out the equivalent of Moore's law for gene sequencing with the arrival of massively parallel sequencing technology or next-generation sequencing. And as a result of that, we've seen an inflection point in health, with the cost of human genome about 100,000-fold cheaper than what was first sequenced in 2001. Reaching an all-time low of today of approximately $200. In turn, data volumes are growing rapidly as the cost of sequencing or otherwise analyzing sequence-related information is decreasing significantly. For example, in the human genome space, it's approaching about 2.5-fold increase in daily throughput. And it's not just DNA sequences, it's also RNA sequences, as we saw during COVID, protein sequences, as we're seeing now with innovations around targeted therapies for cancer. And that really are helping us measure more at the finest level of molecular level. So this explosion of omics data, genomic, transcriptomic, and proteomic, are really driving new understanding of biology and understanding disease at the very finest level. And so we're approaching now a moment of providing highly personalized and precisely targeted diagnostics and therapies to patients, known as precision medicine. For example, cancer patients have seen 4-fold increase in their treatment options in the last 10 years. And it's not just cancer, which is the broadest and more used application, but also for infectious diseases, as we saw with COVID. For cardiology, infectious diseases and rare diseases, and many other sort of therapeutic areas, truly realizing the classic Osler of the good physician treats the disease, but the greatest physician treats the patient who has the disease. As we get to understand more and more about the micro level at the individual level, as well as the population level. We also have seen a massive digitization in healthcare in the same period, where we've gone from something like less than 10 to 15% of medical record data in digital form to today, where almost all medical record data are in digital form. Along with that, medical devices that measure you have gone digital. Our ability to sequence and analyze human genome, proteome, or cancer tissue have gone digital. We've seen propagation of new type of information, social information about the environment people live in, like access to food, access to transportation, access to education. People go to their local pharmacies to get COVID or flu vaccine, and that's in digital form. People receive care at home with telemedicine, chatbots, all that is in digital form. And as a result of this digitization, patients today walk around with thousands of data points collected on them throughout their entire health journey. Harnessing this highly contextualized and complex set of multimodal data is the very key to advanced precision medicine. However, the majority of this information is unstructured data, which means that it needs to be extracted and transformed before it can be searched or analyzed. It is estimated that 97% of this data today is not used since it lacks structure, where the process to extract this information is both error-prone and labor-intensive to most health systems that are trying to leverage this information to advance care. Take, for example, medical images, which constitute about 90% of medical data today. Across the globe, in a single year, there are over 5.5 billion image procedures done by a shrinking number of radiologists trying to do more and more studies every single day. Additionally, the typical image study size has doubled in the last decade to approximately an average of 150 megabytes per study. Furthermore, health systems store multiple copies of the same image data across their clinical and research systems, further complicating this issue when increasing costs. And it can be very difficult to structure this information, where scientists and researchers spend weeks or months trying to structure this data in order to derive insights using advanced analytics and machine learning. Additionally, the explosion of the petascale data around the biology of disease has far outpaced human capacity to consume and understand it. This is a major challenge for scientists and clinicians who are trying to use omics data or multi-omics data to deliver personalized care and discover new therapies. The size, rapid accumulation, complexity, and heterogeneity of this data pose difficulties for most customers trying to tap this information with existing tools or existing systems. This data also creates different kind of challenges. It's no longer just your social security or name, first name, and last name. This is your entire ancestry baked into or encoded into your genome. So really, it's creating challenges with regards to privacy, security, stewardship, access to this information, privacy, as well as provenance, governance, and fairness. If you look deeper also into the medical record data, the majority of that is medical notes. Medical notes are vast, but they also baked into them is the knowledge that doctors and clinicians codify this data, objectively documenting the experience they're having with their patients, so that it's immensely valuable to be able to kind of extract that information and learn from it. However, these data lack structure and oftentimes include typos, abbreviations, and in medicine, it's a highly contextual field, meaning every entity that you find has to be mapped to a specific ontology. For example, if you have a condition or a disease, well, that needs to be mapped to a code called ICD-10. There are over 74,000 of those codes. If you look for billing for insurance purposes, you're trying to map to a different kind of code called CPT. If you're trying to extract medications and dosage and the brand name and the active ingredients and how frequent it is, even the same medication, different frequency, can have two separate codes, and that follow a different ontology called RX norm. And there's over 60,000 of those codes. If you look globally about grouping conditions and diseases into concepts, well, there are over 370,000 codes. The process to codify this information and structure it is immensely labor-intensive for a lot of these health systems. And you can't rely on just simple linking systems to be able to do this job. These compounding factors are slowing down decision-making at the point of care, which can affect not only the care delivery, but also the care quality. Every healthcare provider, a payer, a life science company is trying to structure this information and piece together all these types of data in order to create a 360 view of a patient's entire medical history, try to identify trends in entire population, and share securely and learn from this data. Because if you do, you can make better decision support for the patients, you can design better clinical trials, you can operate more efficiently, or better manage the entire population and identify trends for the population. So we have been making material investment in this space by helping healthcare and life science companies organize and make sense of their vast troves of data, which includes purpose-built HIPAA-eligible services, almost all enabled by machine learning. First, in 2020, we introduced Amazon Health Lake. Amazon Health Lake helps healthcare customers store, transform, and analyze both structured and unstructured data in the cloud and at scale. Medical record data that have medical notes, for example, will automatically be structured using Amazon Health Lake, where the entire information now is codified and available for analytics. Just recently, we announced Amazon Health Lake Analytics, a purpose-built service to help healthcare organizations query and derive insights from multi-modal health data, both at the individual population level in just a few clicks. Amazon Health Lake Analytics enable customers to ingest and normalize raw health data from disparate sources, and then enable sharing of that information securely across an enterprise while enabling advanced analytics and machine learning with just a few clicks. You can build powerful dashboards to identify gaps in care in the population or manage disease, and then be able to also build, train, and deploy many machine learning models at scale to identify for AI-driven predictions, such as someone's risk of hospital readmission after they're being discharged, or identify the right level of treatment for the right person. Altogether, this capability saves you months of work and engineering work to be able to kind of stitch all this information together and be able, before you can be able to store and analyze. In turn, healthcare customers will be able now to focus on what they do best, which is take care of patients and deliver high-quality care. We also recently announced Amazon Health Lake Imaging. Amazon Health Lake Imaging is a new HIPAA-eligible service to help you store, access, and analyze medical images at petabyte scale in the cloud. It's designed for fast, sub-second image retrieval in the cloud that's directly accessed from the clinical workflow, while enabling existing systems and medical viewers to access that data, and then be able to structure this information, and so that way you can analyze it with Amazon Health Lake Analytics. Amazon Health Lake Images also allows access to single encrypted medical image data to derive all your applications, and is estimated as a result through advanced compression is to be able to reduce your total cost of medical images up to 40%. And just yesterday, we announced Amazon Omics, a purpose-built service that will help bioinformaticians, scientists, and researchers store, query, analyze, and generate insights from genomic, transcriptomic, and other omics data at scale. There are three components to Amazon Omics. The first component is omics-aware object store. This storage allows researchers to store, discover, and share new raw sequence data efficiently and securely and at a low cost. The second component is Amazon Omics Workflows, which allows you to run reproducible bioinformatics workflows, basically software that can analyze these raw sequences into their underlying variants. The data can exist in the omics storage or on S3 to be able to process with these workflows, while the service removes all the heavy and differentiated lifting for you to manage, provision, and scale the underlying infrastructure and secure it. And the third component is Omics Analytics, which simplifies and analyzing and normalizing the output of these raw sequences, the variants and annotations, so that way in a query-ready format, so it's ready for analysis. So think of Amazon Analytics as the data lake for variants and annotations. Now you can create or define a cohort of patients based on a number of attributes, such as, for example, you might be searching across many, many genes in the entire population, or you might be able to identify one single mutation, zoom in on a patient, link up with all their clinical data and medical images data using Amazon Health Lake. Now you have a longitudinal record on an individual population then be able to build, train, and deploy many machine learning models efficiently and quickly with a few clicks to be able to now derive AI-driven insights, such as someone's predisposition to a particular disease, or identify an efficacy of a line of therapy or treatment that might be beneficial for this patient. For example, with Amazon Omics, we have AWS partner LifeBit will offer its customers access to optimized storage and analytics at scale for its large omics data, and more reliable and scalable bioinformatics workflows in order to remove any heavy and deficient lifting or the cost as a barrier to derive insights. We have partners such as NVIDIA, GE Healthcare, and Artris among customers as well, such as University of Maryland or Radboud Medical University Center, who have been able to also to use Amazon Health Lake Imaging to drive now cloud-based medical intelligence applications with high scalability and view and performance in the cloud. We have Rush University Medical Center using Amazon Health Lake in order to take care of its population by merging and bringing together medical record data, social determinants of health data, as well as cardiometabolic data around the population to close gaps in care and improve health equity for the population they serve. So let's demonstrate these capabilities with a lung cancer use case. So let me set the scene a little bit. Lung cancer is classified into two major components depending on how the cells look under the microscope. Non-small cell lung cancer by far is the largest type, or the most common type of lung cancer. Out of 10 patients with lung cancer, 8 or 9 will have non-small cell lung cancer. And while these tumors are similar under the microscope, however, the genetic makeup of each tumor can be very, very different. Cancer cells typically have a faulty gene that produces an abnormal protein that in turn affect the cell to grow and spread faster, basically become cancerous. And we refer to these faulty genes or proteins as biomarkers. It's very important to understand which biomarkers these cells have in order to identify the right drug to target them in order to stop the growth. And here we depict different subtypes of non-small cell lung cancer as different doors, each with a unique lock, that's the biomarker, and a unique key to each door, and that's the targeted drug. Biomarkers commonly found in non-small cell lung cancer, for example, include genes such as EGFR, ALK, or KRAS, as well as proteins such as PD-L1 protein. Testing for each of these biomarkers can simply be done by sequencing a tumor tissue using advanced technologies such as next-generation genome sequencing that I mentioned earlier. And currently, there are several FDA-approved targeted therapies for non-small cell lung cancer depending on the biomarkers to inhibit. For example, there are EGFR inhibitors, there's a KRAS inhibitor. There's also a new type of promising recent advancement in treatment, such as checkpoint inhibitors. These basically unlock the brakes that the tumor or the cancer cells put on the immune system. There's even more advancement in how can you train your immune system to boost it to also target these tumor cells. But all really comes down to really understanding which biomarkers we're dealing with at the cell level, and then also understand that, from the rest of the population, what works and what doesn't. So today, through an example with a patient of non-small cell lung cancer, both Lee and I will demonstrate using these purpose-built services to piece together a holistic view of a patient's entire medical history from all their complex multimodal data, their medical record, their omics data, as well as their medical imaging information. First, we will use a reference population data set that is in the public domain to be able to create a cohort of patients with non-small cell lung cancer, and from that is look into and study their associated biomarkers and targeted therapies. Then we will zoom in on a particular patient with non-small cell lung cancer to understand which biomarker this patient has based on a sequencing of their tumor in order to suggest the appropriate therapy. And finally, we're examining the patient's disease progression over time, now they're on that particular treatment, by studying subsequent medical image data. Since oftentimes the disease is not just in the lungs, oftentimes it spreads to other novel organs, such as the liver, the bones, or the brain. So understanding how they're responding to treatment, we can really track that through those images. So let's get to it. So first, so if we switch over. All right, perfect. So Lee, can we start with the population sequence data set and see what we can learn from it?
Yeah, thank you for that excellent introduction, Taha. So my name's Lee. I'm a principal developer advocate with AWS. I work with our Health AI services team. And as mentioned, this demo, I'm going to show you how to combine 3 of our purpose-built ML and analytics services, specifically Amazon Health Lake Analytics, Amazon Omics, and Amazon Health Lake Imaging, to investigate a health and genomics use case from population to patient. And in particular, as Taha laid out, we're going to start at a pretty high level. We're going to look at a patient population of about 10,000 individuals. We're going to zoom in into a specific disease cohort of just over 100. And then we're going to isolate biomarkers for precision medicine based on population genomics. And then finally, we'll end up looking at an individual patient outcome. And so to show you how easy, how simple it is to use these 3 services together, I'm going to do most of my demo, practically all of my demo, in an Amazon SageMaker notebook, which I have on screen here. All right, so your first question. How can we first look at the patient population data set? So yes, let's do that. The first service I'm going to use for that is Amazon Health Lake. So I'm going to go here. And what I've done is I have pre-created a Health Lake data store, and I've imported roughly, like I said, 10,000 medical records into it. It's a total of about 32 gigabytes of data. And during that import process, Health Lake normalizes the data into a schema called FHIR, or FHIR. That stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, and is a standard in the industry for exchanging electronic health records. And so with FHIR, you can, the FHIR standard also defines an API that we can use to query the data store using simple HTTP requests. And Health Lake automatically indexes the unstructured text like medical notes, reports, and then normalizes that data by mapping to medical ontologies, such as SNOMED codes for medical concepts and conditions. So for example, we can look for conditions that match the SNOMED code 254637007. This is the code for non-small cell lung cancer, so I'm going to do that here in this first cell. And what that's going to pull back is a bunch of JSON. This is we see in the response, there's going to be several records here. I'm only showing the first one. This usually generates a page of 10, and there's multiple pages here. If we scroll through this individual record, we see that it is for non-small cell lung cancer and is associated with a patient with this ID. So we can go further and we can say, okay, well, who is this patient? What kind of information do we know about them? So then we can query the other resource, the patient resource, and we can get their individual information. All right. So
how can we make sense of this data? Specifically, how can you analyze this population data first?
Yeah, we can. Well, with Health Lake Analytics, your data stores are now available as databases in your AWS Glue data catalog, which means you can query them with Amazon Athena. And so as we can see, my data store is here. What I did was I looked for all the databases that are associated here in my Glue data catalog, and that is the link I created to the data store I created before. And so, like before, we can query for conditions. So this will take maybe a few seconds. And I'll run the cell below it too. And we can also query for patients. A few seconds again. So, and here we can see we're getting pandas data frames back. And the patient query I ran wasn't just for one, it was across the entire resource. So I now have access to all of the patients in my data set. And I think another important thing to notice here is these are pretty straightforward SQL queries. And because of that, I can now cross-reference both conditions and patients. And for anyone who's worked with databases in SQL before, it's just a simple table join. So the join happens right here. I'm doing a join on conditions by patients on the patient ID. If I run this query, I should get back a full table of patients and the reported conditions in the same data frame. This one takes a little bit of time. There you go. So there you go. Let's scroll back and forth here, and we have particular condition, patients, the conditions that they were reporting, and according to SNOMED codes. All right.
So can I see specific characteristics of the non-small cell lung cancer population?
Well, let's take a look. Well, why don't we take a look at what we can do further with this data first?
Yes.
So why don't we, how about we create some visualizations?
That'd be great.
Right? All right. So to do that, well, we can take all of this information and we can bring it into QuickSight. So QuickSight is a way that you can connect interactive visualizations to data in AWS. And for this particular dashboard, I took those queries that you saw me run earlier, and I created those. I created QuickSight data sets from them and created this dashboard from it. And so in this dashboard, what we can see is that our patient population is from the Seattle area, so right here. We can see their age distribution, their marital statuses, their genders, and we have some of the conditions down here below. And this dashboard is fully interactive. We can go in and filter in by particular ages. You can see how the data shifts around here. Set that a little bit. We can say, let's look at the folks that have never been married, or we can look at what's going on with only the males in the population. And importantly, we can also filter this down by condition. So I've created a control up here that will target into non-small cell lung cancer. So if I activate this, I'm just going to drop down and say, who has non-small cell lung cancer, or who has reported it? And we see that we've now drilled into our total population. We've got about 133 cases that are in this data set. All right, so what we can do now is we can go back to our SageMaker notebook. That was the visual way of doing it. If you are a data scientist, you like to live in code, you can do this in code. It's really just a simple pandas data frame operation. Where'd my data frame go? All right, just in case. The data frame should look like this, where you just subset the data frame. Say which rows have is non-small cell lung cancer code associated. Okay, so that's the Health Lake analytics set. So
can you show me some treatment options specific to biomarkers that we can learn from the population, the non-small cell lung cancer population?
Sure. All right, so for some of our patients, we may have collected tumor and blood samples to help identify specific biomarkers that can be used for targeted treatment using genomic sequencing. So in terms of genomic sequencing, in terms of genomic data, such biomarkers could be single letter changes to a person's genome, their unique sequence of DNA. And these are reported as what we call variants, and they come in a special file format called VCF. This is the wrong section here, so let's go here. We want to look at the genomic stuff. All right, so this this is, if you've never seen what a VCF file looks like, this is one. This is an example one. This is actually a pretty simple case. But when you talk about tumor cases, tumor genomes, they could have millions of variants in a file like this. And working with data like this has previously required domain specialized tools. But as the amount of genomic data grows, it becomes more difficult to use those domain-specific tools at the population scale, or even for cohorts of thousands of patients. So let's get back into the notebook here. So today, using Amazon Omics variant stores, you can ingest this data and make it easier to analyze. So I've created a variant store before ahead of time, and with just a single API call, I'm pointing to a VCF file in S3. I can import it into my variant store just like that. And then, then once I get it in there, it's available for me to query and analyze further. So what does that mean? Well, Amazon Omics variant stores can be queried with Athena and SQL. I hope you're starting to recognize a pattern here. And what does that look like? Well, I'm going to run a query right here against that variant store. And this one will take a little bit of time. So this is a particular query that is going to run against my variant store. It's looking for all of the variants on human chromosome 1. And while this runs, probably a question in your head is, how much data is this accessing? Well, the variant store I created is I created this one by importing the individual variant information from 3,000 individual genomes. That is roughly a terabyte of data. The table that I'm querying has 20 columns and 20 billion rows, so overall 400 billion data elements. And you see this particular query, it scanned about 7 gigabytes of data and came back within a few seconds. So
that's awesome. So how would I learn more about these variants?
All right, well, So genomic variant information is usually paired with curated annotations that provide more information, like what genes are affected, what diseases a variant is related to, or even recommendations for symptoms, for treatment of symptoms.
How can I use those annotations like that for these variants?
Okay, well.
So basically trying to enrich those variants with these annotations.
All right, so annotation data sets they're available in many forms. They're either as subscription databases or as open data sets. A popular one that a lot of our customers use is one from the National Center for Biotechnology Information, and it's called ClinVar. It is a public archive of the relationships between human variations and observable traits like disease symptoms. And so annotation data sets like those can be stored in Amazon Omics annotation stores. And so just like VCF files, you can import an annotation data set into Omics with a simple API call. And here we go.
And can I query those annotations too?
Oh, yeah. So while this is happening, so Amazon Omics, like I said, annotations come in many forms. And Amazon Omics knows a few of the common ones. And while it's importing it, it's doing the ETL, it's analyzing the schema, and transforming it into a more queryable form. And so once that import is complete, your annotations are available as, anyone? An Athena database that you can query with SQL. All right, good. You're with me here. All right, so let's take a look at what that's like. All right, here we go. Learning about annotations. So here we go. What I've done here is I've run a query that is looking for variants that are associated with non-small cell lung cancer. And the SNOMED code is 254-63-7007. All right. So we've got a number of variants here. It looks like about 100 or so. And then what we can do is we can just do some regular data science, regular Python data frames operations on here, do some grouping and aggregation. And we see that there are certainly several variants here that are like on genes that Taha mentioned. So we got a couple on KRAS and certainly a few on EGFR. And what we can do is we can look even further and say, okay, which one of these variants are particularly important? So I can now use this annotation to say, find variants that have annotations say they're drug responsive. So now what we can do is we can cross-reference the, we can now use the variant data from our individuals and the annotation data that we just pulled together to find individual samples that match these drug-responsive variants. And so how do I do that? SQL, table joins. So the query I have here, it's a little long, but it's not complicated, right? So all I'm doing in this first cell here is I'm doing a couple of pre-queries just to make the syntax in the later query a little more readable. So down here in the main query, we've got, we're doing effectively a join on our variant table to our annotation table. And the join criteria is, it should be what you'd expect, right? So I'm looking at, I want to see cross-references between variants based on their genomic coordinates and their specific changes in the genome. Okay, so let's run this query. So we run this query. We see we got a couple of samples here that have known variants in EGFR. And so these are samples that represent individual patients that we can then target with specialized treatment.
Yeah, so with these enriched variants through the annotations, now we have the clinical significance all the way down to that particular. So here we have four patients, right? Mm-hmm. So my patient has EGFR, and as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes disease spreads beyond the lung. So can I see a recent image of an MRI scan for their brain?
Okay. All right, let's talk about that. I'm gonna close this. Let's open this guy. Okay, so based on reported symptoms, genetic biomarkers, we found earlier, a patient might be referred for medical imaging, where unfortunately their doctor might see something like this. All right, so here I have a DICOM image that I've loaded from local disk, and we see there's a tumor behind the left eye. So this is a DICOM format image. I loaded this from my local notebook environment. DICOM is it's a standard for communication and management of medical imaging information. That said, it is not typical, at least I haven't heard of it, for doctors to have these images just sitting around on their computer. So normally, these would be housed in an health imaging storage system. So, and now that image storage system can use Health Lake imaging. So let's go. So I can now retrieve this I've created a data store. I've put these images into a Health Lake imaging DICOM data store. And I can retrieve that very same image using a couple of API calls. So first step, get the DICOM metadata. Second step, get the pixels. And then we can plot it using regular Python image plotting tools. There you go, very same image. And I think what I want to really highlight here is how fast this was. This took under a second to retrieve this image. And the point is that Health Lake imaging is optimized for speed. And so, because we want to view as many images as possible, right?
Yeah. So my patient now, we understand they have the EGFR. We identified from population data set. what is the right significance of that, plus the target therapy. So for the last 6 weeks, they've been now, and we recognize from the MRI scan, they have a mass in their brain. Can I see subsequent studies, say for the last 6 weeks, to be able to see whether they're responding to the treatment or not?
All right, so Health Lake imaging makes it very easy just to retrieve the imaging metadata. This is information like patient ID, imaging procedure descriptions, and retrieving only the metadata makes it easy to sort out what images you want to retrieve before actually downloading the pixels. So I can scan my DICOM data store metadata for a specific patient and filter out only the imaging sets that I need to track their tumor progression. So here I'm going to pull back the metadata for about 20 image sets representing imaging visits from 4 patients. And with just some basic Python code, I can filter this down to just one patient that I want to look at. And once I have the right image sets, I can retrieve all of the pixels associated with it as streaming data. There we go. So these are all streaming bodies. They're not actually in memory yet. And once I have all of those ready to go, I can just use regular Python plotting and image analysis tools to analyze that series of images, to create a time series visualization that shows that tumor has gone down over subsequent visits. No, I don't want to add the helper.
Fascinating.
That's
Alrighty.
So, we can switch back to the slides now. But yeah, that is pretty much it for my demo. Just to recap, we used Amazon Health Lake Analytics. Using Health Lake Analytics, I was able to find a specific cohort of patients based on their medical history. Using Amazon Omics, I was able to identify biomarkers within that cohort that could be treated with targeted therapeutics. And finally, using Amazon Health Lake Imaging, I was able to track a patient's tumor progression to determine if my chosen therapy led to a positive outcome. And with each of these purpose-built ML and analytics services doing the heavy lifting for me. They did the heavy lifting of ingesting and transforming the complex data from electronic health records, genomic variants, and medical imaging into more accessible forms. And then overall simplifying the steps that I needed to do to get my analysis done. So I did this all with simple queries, as you saw, simple SQL queries and Python code, and also within a single SageMaker, Amazon SageMaker notebook, which means that the data is now here in SageMaker and easily accessible for further analysis using common data science tools and for training and deploying machine learning models.
Indeed. Thank you, Lee. I mean, it looks like we're able to harness all this multimodal complex set of data both at the population level and individual level to truly provide highly personalized and targeted therapy or treatment, and all done here with a single pane of glass, as you saw. So, I mean, by building on AWS, you will have access to purpose-built health services with Amazon Omics and Amazon Health Lake, in addition to the broadest and deepest set of AI and machine learning purpose-built technologies and services on top of the most comprehensive cloud, including data storage, security, analytics, compute services, and more. To be able to support your data and machine learning workloads with consistent data transparency and control to protect patient privacy and security, and to make sense of your vast troves of health data. And we really can't wait to see what you guys can really do with these purpose-built technologies, put them together to derive insights from your complex multimodal health data. And with that, we'd love to take any questions you have. Thank you.